Welcome everybody to another Grand Slam tennis lesson, Big Point Player. And we've already had a few sequential lessons. So one is the general concept and training on how to raise your game at big points rather than just stay the same or underperform. Then we've had the baseline to baseline competition and how you can set up and do the disruptive cross-court down the line. Then the sequence to that, which is the approach shot and the so-called easy put-away volley or smash versus the passing shot and lob. And then we've had the first serve and the first strike against the returner serve. So now we're into the second serve and returner serve. And arguably, in fact, probably not arguably, this is the biggest point of big points. So before we sort of picture the scene of you behind the white line on your second serve, about to save a set or a match, or about to win a set or a match, just to introduce the team. And one of the great benefits of Gladiator Tennis and Training is that we're able to give our members access to people that are truly expert in their subject matter in the world. You might not have heard of them. If you had, you certainly wouldn't get access to them. So today I want to introduce you to, apart from our old friend Thomas Mensinger, and you'll say not so much of the old, one of the insightful, innovative international coaches and head of Gladiator coaching, and has conceived the drills and sequence of shots. And Phil Johnson. Now, there are a number of people that are sports psychologists in this world, and there are a number of clinical psychologists. There are very, very few, probably a handful of people that are clinical sport psychologists. Phil counsels individuals and teams within the Champions League. Probably the combined value of the people that he coaches is in the hundreds of millions, and international high performance stars, as well as billionaires that also want to raise their game under pressure. So those are our two guests today. And the big point under consideration is the second serve. So Thomas, I just want you to describe, if you may, the situation, which should be quite a straightforward situation of you. And also at the same time, sorry, there is a battle going on here between the people doing the second serve and the people returning serve. So Thomas, just lay out the scene, if you, and I suppose it doesn't matter too much whether you're there to save the set or match, although I suspect there might be more pressure on you to do that than there is to do the second serve to win the set or match. So if you would just describe the situation, probably from the server's point of view and the returner serve's point of view.
Thanks, Mark. So yes, the server is doing his second serve. He's aware that, missing the serve is immediate point for his opponent. So that's why he might feel extra pressure. Now, depending on his skill level and his trust of his second serve, I think the level of pressure will vary, will depend. So if you don't really trust your serve, then you will feel more pressure. So the server is under pressure. I need to make this serve because if I miss it, I'm going to lose the point. He also may expect an attack from his opponent if his second serve is not good enough. And so all these thoughts and future projections might go through his mind, and this is what creates pressure. On the other side,
if I just interrupt as we go, but he's there. So arguably, it's a process you've done thousands of times before. You're not reacting to play or a bouncing ball. You dictate when you start, where you throw the ball up, and the sequence. So how does pressure take hold, and what are the things that he's trying to do with his serve as he's just alone with his thoughts? That's probably where we are. You're alone with your thoughts on a big.
So the challenge for the server is that he can remove the outcome from his mind and focus on the process, because the pressure is created in his mind because he's focused on the outcome. So, and most of this is basically what he doesn't want. So that's what creates pressure. So his mind is in the future, in the outcome, rather than in the process, which you just described. So if the player is able to return back to the process, which he has repeated thousands of times, then he will be on the right path to overcome the pressure in this situation.
So the process is, one, he's got to get the ball in.
Yes.
Two is he's got to make it so that he's neutralizing.
Yes, but these are already the outcomes. So the process is, I will execute my serve the way I execute my serve. So I will just go through my motions, through my ritual. You know, I will visualize my trajectory like I've done all the times. First, I'll start my ritual. You know, I'll exhale. I'll get myself in the right state, and then I will just execute the serve as I've done all the times, just knowing the direction where I want to serve the serve, and then just has to do it. So that is the process. I'm just executing the serve. So yes, he has an idea where he wants the serve to land, but he's not attached to it. I do have an idea. Okay, and I will just execute the serve. That is the process. It's not affected by the outcome.
Let me just repurpose that in language. So, because it might not be a process that many competitive tennis players follow.
Yeah.
So you're saying the first process is, one is the belief that I've done this thousands of times, I can do it again. Second one would be to take a deep breath, exhale, and just get to a state of quietness in your brain.
Yes.
Third is to visualize the first bounce, the square foot or the square meter that you wanted to bounce. Then the trajectory that it needs to get there. Visualize it, trigger, bold, go with it 100%, committed to the process, as we say, not attached to the outcome. So that's what we would do. It sounds quite very straightforward, except, of course, we're now doing it like we're on a plank 30 meters in the air, a very abnormal condition, so nothing is normal in this situation. So the tendency might be to come through your shot too early. So instead of neutralizing, you're putting it nicely into his hitting zone. So now you're on the defensive. Or, of course, you might push it out nervously. So with that, over to Phil, because like the first serve, this is probably the nearest equivalent to the penalty shootout, I suppose. You can do that in practice 1,000 times. It's easy peasy. Come the moment, cometh the hour. It's a very different thing. What are your learnings from football that could be applied to the second serve, Phil?
Well, there was research done by the Dutch national team into over thousands of penalties being taken. And they concluded that the first most important thing was that you needed a minimum of 3 seconds whilst placing the ball on the spot, during which you begin to make your decision about where you're going to place the ball. Then you would walk back without turning your back on the goalkeeper, and you avoid eye contact. And so this process is all about trying to avoid giving physical information to your goalkeeper about what it is you're going to do. And then it's about having a decisive mental approach to taking the kick. So when we look at the second serve, one of the first things that you're looking at is how good are you with your second serve, in the same way as when did you miss your last penalty? So one of the first issues is about closing off any historical memories about failure so that it doesn't interfere with the current performance.
And how can you do that? Because it's an easy thing to say. Do you just lock on to, this is what I've done 1,000 times in practice, here's my ritual, and not think about the last time you were in this situation when you choked and dumped it?
Well, it's simple and it's complex. The simple is, as Thomas was suggesting, is that you try to keep in the here and now, in the process of the moment, rather than considering the outcome. So that in the pre-serve routine, you are remaining in the moment. You're remaining focused on the actions that you're creating, and with it, the image and the biomechanics of the serve.
Can I chip in there, Phil? Because it is a key point. It's probably the vital point. Is that there is a temptation when you're on that white line and you're under this pressure, so your nerves are jangled and your heartbeat is, and your gut is, and all that sort of stuff, is that your idea of focus is to focus on, I must not lose this point, or I must win this point. And what you're saying, and what Thomas has said, is that's not our definition of focus. Our definition of focus is the clarity of thought of how the frames are going to be played out second by second, from the toss to the trajectory to the bounce to your biomechanics. And if you focus on this clarity of thought or process, the brain automatically does two things. It automatically gets rid of future and past. So you're not thinking about the past and something that you've dumped, and you're not thinking about the future on the what if and the outcome. The second thing that the brain automatically does is it gets rid of self. And by that I mean the voice in your head that's trying to shout and jabble instructions to you to get it over and done with quickly, that also quietens down. So I think one of the key trainings, just to pick up on focus, is not focus on the outcome of the point, winning or lose. It's the clarity of thought of the process, how it goes out.
Exactly that. So you are in the zone, you're in the moment. That's the point. And that when you do that, you can utilize these breathing techniques to actually create a relaxation and to sustain what we refer to as attentional focus. And the point of the focus is that it's a dynamic situation. It's not fixed. It's something that's continuous. And so the breathing, the process, and maintaining it in the here and now is what enables you to reproduce the kind of outcome that you are used to doing both in training and in the competition.
Okay, talk us through a bit more about breathing. We have a Gladiator breathing sequence.
Well, the first thing is that when you take the breath in, you're creating a relaxation with a messaging system from your brain. And so it's taking you more away from the fight-flight response into a more measured focus in the moment. This allows you to have a clarity of concentration on the actions that you're about to make, whilst blocking any negative self-talk in terms of what's happened in the past and what the future outcome might be.
Okay, and this would be, we teach one deep breath from the abdomen, filling up the lungs and the brain space, rather than what you would normally be in this pressure situation is shallow breaths.
Yes, and the reason that it's successful is at the beginning of the breath, you're working with the fight-flight response of the right hemisphere of the brain, and you're allowing in the depth of the breath to allow the same information to go to the right-hand side of the brain, which deals with process. And then both sides of the brain send to the amygdala this information for decision-making, and that decision-making is often better as a result of that timed response, which we term emotionally intelligent.
So with me one time, because this is a learning for me. Right-hand side, left-hand side of the brain, getting into sync through a deep breath that's held before exhaling. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Gosh. So if you didn't do that, right-hand side brain, left-hand side brain is in balance.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily call it imbalance. What's happened is it's a parallel distributed process, is the technical term. In other words, that they're working together, but it's whether you actually give the process side of the brain the opportunity to impact on the decision making.
What side of the brain is the process brain?
The left-hand side, predominantly. I mean, they're constantly interacting with each other, but the fight or flight responses are predominantly right brain.
Okay. So Thomas and I will find it interesting. So we have 25 seconds between one point finishing and another point starting. So as part of that 25 seconds, we take a deep breath and we get into this relaxed state where we've allowed process part of the brain to kick in. And then we can think what the process is, and then we can enact the process like just a trigger without thinking. Bold, audacious, even, as our military people say.
Yes.
Again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you say that's a 1, 2, 3?
Yeah. There are other things that you could add in which give you an enhanced security in that movement.
Go on.
For example, in the brain spotting that I do, it isn't just about removing past negative experiences. One can create a positive experience with an eye position that reinforces that relaxed state and your performance in the future, so as to speak, so that when you make the decision, as with the penalty, as to where the ball's going to go, bearing in mind the variability of the goalkeeper moving and indeed your opponent moving in their position, then by looking at that position, you are enabling yourself an advantage that you position your body physically more accurately to place the ball there, and that there is an ease of flow biomechanically because you're in this more relaxed state and you are decisive in the moment of where you want to place the ball. And that's the only future that you're thinking about.
Okay. So decisive, would you say that's sort of aligned to boldness or audaciousness? Just a question. Decisive. It's like pulling a trigger.
Yes.
No ifs, no buts, no maybes. Here's the bounce. Here's the trajectory. Here's what I've done. Decide, go.
Yes. And that when you do that in training, that you are preparing yourself for this situation.
Okay. Okay. Stop that now, because we'll do a few things in training. Thomas, 2 questions for you. One is, for me, I would either, and I can control the ball quite well, slice the ball into the opponent's sort of left hip, if that makes sense, to neutralize them, or kick it down to the tee so it bounces high by their left shoulder. Would you think both serves are okay, or would you just think the kicking is actually where it's at?
Yeah, I think both serves are okay. If you are skilled enough that you feel like you're saying, I'm skilled enough to do them both, then I think both are okay.
Okay. Because you're trying to
mix them up.
So the advantage that we have against penalty kickers is that it is the second serve, i.e. it follows the first serve. So me personally, and then whatever Thomas or Phil thinks, is that when I know it's a big point, invariably I would do my first serve, where if it misses, I would be doing the second serve. So in the military term, it's called watch my tracer, as the first bullet sends out the trace, second serve to follow. And hence you just got to do a minor adjustment in whatever it is, the trajectory or whatever, and boom, away you go. What do you think about that? And are there any other advantages with the second serve following the first?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. If your serves are not too different, so that you're not going for, a perfectly flat serve, and then you have to change it to a kick serve. So assuming your first serve had some rotation. So yes, that's exactly a trace around. So if it misses, you know how to adjust. Of course, the key here is that you are aware of it, that, you're not overcome with emotion or fear or pressure, but that you're actually in the now, that you're observing what you just did, that you notice what you just did with your serve, and that you just adjust for the next serve.
Okay.
So,
and that's easier said than done, except we just need to remember that there is this voice in your head, the self, that's screaming and shouting and raising the volume in your head. So I think another thing to note and try to note at the time is that if there is the voice in your head screaming and shouting and you can just listen to it, then you know that circumstance is driving you, and you need to take a deep breath and get rid of the distractions and get into process and this clarity of thought of freeze frame by freeze frame, and then the voice in your head should quieten down.
Yes, and I would just like to add that
Sure.
that actually the process that we are describing of what you need to do later, to me personally, in my journey, is not as difficult as actually becoming aware that there is a voice in my head, because that means that
Correct.
I have to split my attention, that I am actually becoming aware, like in mini meditation, of what is actually going through my mind, because only then I can correct something that is going maybe in the wrong way in my mind. So I would say that, that is actually the biggest challenge for players, to become aware of this moment and their ability to actually change their thoughts. In my experience, in this case, it actually took quite some time before I became aware, and I did not have a coach. No one told me that. So it just happened on its own. But eventually I became aware that this voice that is telling me, don't make a double fault, is actually not helping. Yeah. So it took me a while, because for a while I was automatically following my thoughts, telling me that I be careful not to make a double fault. And then most of the times I did a double fault.
Yeah. But I'm going to ask a question over to you, Phil, how the brain works. So a bit like in golf, when you're there about to hit the ball and you can see a lake in front of you, and the brain says, don't hit it into the water, don't hit it in the water, don't hit it in the water. 9 times out of 10, you will hit it in the water. If you're there with the second serve saying, don't hit it out, don't hit it out, don't hit it out, you'll hit it out. Any observations from your trauma or other experience, Phil?
Well, first of all, that kind of don't, shouldn't, wouldn't, negative self-talk becomes often a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whilst Thomas was talking, the word adjust, which he used, would be a great trigger word, because it's very real about the circumstance, and it's just one word.
What,
so that, sorry?
Did you say adjust?
Adjust,
okay.
Yes. So that having made a first serve which hasn't worked, and making the decision to replicate that same serve which didn't work, means that, as Thomas says, you need to become aware of what it is that you've done, and therefore you need to be aware of what it is that you need to adapt and change in order to make it successful. And I would say that there's less risk involved in that than doing a different kind of serve, because you've already got an image and an experience of the one that you've just done, but it's something that needs to be tweaked or managed differently, but with the same process.
Okay.
And
I've got that. I just want to pick out something that Thomas has said, which I think people have got, is that so there are two things that we say are simple, but only the elite do it. One thing we say on simple is watch the ball onto the racket. Nobody does it apart from the elite. And the other thing we say is to be able to listen to your brain to make sure that you're controlling and quietening the voice in your head through the breathing and clarity of thought and process that we've talked about. Sounds simple, but invariably people just go from breakdown point to the baseline, start again, with undoubtedly the voice in the head driving their process. So I think the ability to use the 25 seconds to the full, not the 5 seconds that it would normally take just going from one point to bumble to another point, use that 25 seconds to do the 3-step thing we just talked about is critical.
Yes, and as I'm listening to your description, I'm thinking about really what happens in training. And when I work live with any athlete, whether it's a rugby goal kicker or a tennis player or a footballer, I'm asking them to become aware of what they've done physically and to become aware of the position of their body and where they're looking, so that if you like, the biomechanics of what it is that they're doing is correct, so that supports consistent performance. The second thing then is in the mental preparation. And I really do think that this is something that needs to be trained equally with the skill acquisition of the physical part of the tennis, so that as soon as you finish your first serve, which hasn't gone through, that in that 25 seconds, you're saying, okay, what do I need to change to make this work? Am I going to repeat the same serve? Am I going to change? And the sooner you make that decision, the sooner that you can prepare for it. So I think there's a mini process that happens in the first 10 seconds where you have to make.
Phil, just stop you. I just want to be correct. Thomas, is there a ruling that says how long you've got between the first serve and the second serve?
I'm not aware of it. I'm not sure.
I was talking about 25 seconds between points, Phil, just for accuracy. And obviously between first serve and second serve, that's not a point. But anyway, you've got whatever you've got, 5-10 seconds. So the point is well made. As soon as the first point has gone, you need to get rid of all thoughts of failure, past, oh my God, and straight into the process thinking about the second serve.
Yes, and the ball bouncing and the preparation or the pre-serve routine is constantly used by players to create this opportunity. And so it is there to be used. What I'm suggesting is that you really need to train for this.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pass to Thomas now. So Thomas, with our Gladiator training, starting with our cone to the left of the tee and moving the cone ever increasingly forward. And we've all seen, amazingly, that people with a little bit of training can get the ball consistently on a very narrow area by starting a little wider and then gradually moving in. And the point situation that add the pressure on top of the technical. Can you just give us a minute or two on that?
Yes. So the idea is that, we don't only work on accuracy of the serve without any consequence. We are in our training, since most of our training or all of our training is done one-on-one on court. You're basically competing with your friend, or in this case, your opponent, and you're keeping score. And so that's what adds pressure to the drill, and we might have different types of scoring. But the idea is that you're not only working on your serve without pressure, you're actually competing all the time. You're playing games or sets or mini sets while you're doing a specific drill, so that you get used to trying to be accurate or hitting an accurate serve when it still matters. So that is the whole point of Gladiator training.
Okay. So if we might start, and particularly if you are less skilled, let's say striding a meter out from the center line and putting a cone there, as with your opponent who will do the same with you, and you play a scoring system on how many second serves will bounce between that cone and the tee,
Yes.
and then gradually bring the cone closer towards the tee to add the pressure. So that's one little scoring system.
Yes.
Can we get on to now the returner server? So we talked a lot about the server and the second serve and what they need to do. But there is a battle going on with the returner server who will be trying to out-psych or push them to do something or get themselves into their best state, knowing what their returner serve will be. Can you talk through that, Thomas?
Yeah, here I would just like to point out that, the server is usually just concerned about himself or the outcome. But it's actually good to know that the returner is also under pressure, because they don't want to waste this opportunity having a break point, for example, assuming they have a break point, or if this is a set point for the server, if they waste this opportunity, then it's going to be a set. So I think it's good to know that the server is aware that the returner is also under pressure.
That's a perfect point.
Yes.
Voice in head pops up for returner server as much as voice in head pops up for server. And it is. We all concentrate on ourselves.
Yes.
Never a thought that your opponent is in at least the same state as you. So again, if you're trained then to recognize this state, harness the superpowers that are given to you at big points, knowing that your opponent is in the same state but is reacting, that also will add belief to you that you're going to win the point. I'm sorry to interrupt, Thomas, but you led me on to a great teaching point.
Yes. So again, the returner has to make a choice whether he plays it more safely or he wants to apply pressure on the second serve. And so from returner's point of view, one word that Phil used before is decisive. So I also like to use that word in training, to be decisive, because it somehow overrides all the doubts and, possibly changing your mind or something like that. So just decisive just cuts through all that. And so the returner has to decide, possibly in advance, where he's going to return and what kind of ball. So being decisive, knowing what you want ahead of the second serve, possibly anticipating what is the most likely second serve to come towards you, whether it's forehand or backhand or kick or something. So,
and would you try to visualize for yourself, if it comes to my backhand, this is what I'm going to do. If it comes to my forehand, this is what I'm going to do?
Yes, I would visualize that on every return, always. So I would on second serve. So on first serve, I don't know. I basically, my idea is to go deep down the middle on the first serve. That's my instinctive response. But on the second serve, I would have a pretty good idea. If this happens, I'll do this. If this happens, I'll do this.
And by and large, what are you trying to do? Get it back to the server's feet or wide, or?
It depends. It depends. If my opponent has a much weaker stroke, then I would know which side is that and plan. If it goes to my forehand, I go this way to his weaker side. If it goes to my backhand, then I'll do this stroke to his weaker side. That would be my...
Okay. And how many of us might be capable of doing the Andy Murray take the ball early on the rise? Is that too difficult for us?
It depends on the skills, and it depends on the quality of the second serve. If the second serve is really not that good and you are skilled enough that you know that with high percentage, high probability you can pull it off, then you can decide to do that, yes.
Okay. And we've got a few drills that actually compete second server against returner server in a point situation. Yeah.
Yes. So we are doing exactly that. Both players, the server has a target and with that target, he's trying to neutralize the returner, because if he hits that target close to the T, then he's going to take away the angles from the returner. And the returner is trying to hit a certain target on the server's side, which will neutralize him and prevent him from attacking, because the returner's first goal is to stay neutral so that the server doesn't gain advantage. And then possibly in his next goal, if he's able to do that, then is to create pressure. So again, we're choosing the weaker side of the server, usually the backend, to aim for. And so this is the battle they're doing. They're both trying to hit a certain target. And if they do, they will both succeed. And so I'd like to point out here is also that with this, we are also taking away the outcome of the point, because the point is not played out and you're just focusing on the execution of a certain serve into a target area or of a certain return in the target area. So that is training you to stay in the process, even though there is pressure behind each point, because each point will also count in this competition.
Okay, we have a phrase which we use a lot, and we repeat, called repetition builds strength. So these types of very specific technical and mental drills aligned in practice means that when it comes to a match, it's not a stranger to you. You are used to playing under this emotional situation and calling upon your emotional and tactical and technical procedures.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. For both serving and returner serve. Phil,
Yes.
Anything else that you wish to inject before I probably conclude?
Just that in the reception of the ball, part of the preparation is about anticipation and readiness, so that Thomas has already described the kind of tactical element for both the server and the receiver, so that you are anticipating what the other might do and indeed how you're going to react and respond. And in order to do that more successfully, there has to be a readiness, both mentally and physically, to receive that ball and to act upon it.
Just
So,
like goalkeeper and penalty taker?
yes, absolutely. The only difference is that I think that goalkeepers tend to make decisions too quickly and give away their position to the penalty taker. And I think that tennis is much more capable of holding the attention of the server by positioning for the reception of the ball and moving in that kind of waving movement, demonstrating to the server your anticipation. So that adds more pressure to the server without you physically moving your feet in another direction.
Yeah. And even for us competitive amateur players, about to serve and you're looking down and you can see somebody clearly in aggressive combat battle pose, adds another little bit of pressure. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to try and summarize and conclude in 30 seconds. And if I miss anything, really important now, please say so. So the situation is that the server is on the second serve behind the white line. And instead of listening to the voice in its head saying, finish the point quickly, I'm under pressure, or thinking, ooh, what shall I do now? We have another little phrase that says, at critical moments, do you rise to the occasion or fall to the level of your training? So if you haven't done precise, emotional, technical training, there's nothing to rise to. If you've done that, you can trigger this whole belief and confidence that this is the moment that you've been waiting for. This is when you can rise to the occasion. It's your stage. And if you don't believe that you can raise your game, the best you can hope for is keeping the same. And the probability is you'll be overwhelmed by all these senses and chemicals and you'll play worse. We've got some time to go through our 3-step ritual, which would be to take a deep breath from the abdomen through the chest and flush out all the toxins and mess in your brain, allowing the left and right hand of the brain to be operational, particularly the process side. So now you can engage process, which is to think through exactly where is the ball going to bounce, what is the trajectory for that ball to do, and hence my throw up and body position to do it. The third thing then is to act decisively, I would say audacious and bold, without a thought for the outcome, just to enact the process. And by having done all that, we automatically get rid of the future and the past, and we also get rid of you talking to self. So automatically you get into a quiet space where you can trigger yourself and be bold without fear of outcome. I think those are the trainings. And it's just like, SAS to do a hostage siege, Top Gun fighter pilot just about to get into the aerial battle, or an extreme sports athlete with something amazing in the wave or the snow or the rock. You will never, ever get them at that critical moment being cautious or even thinking about how to play not to lose. They will be bold and decisive on how to win. Can't do it any other way. Everybody fine with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So just maybe one thing that summarizes all that is that, our thoughts of the outcome oftentimes go into what we don't want. So at least we can turn them into what we do want, which is I want the ball to go there. Of course, not be attached to the outcome of the point, but be focused on how do you want the ball to fly and where do you want the ball to land. So you focus on what I do want.
Yes.
And then just allow your training to come out without any censorship, without any checking with too much with your conscious mind. You've done this many times, then just do it.
Yeah. We've just seen some clips before we started of Gasquet and Wawrinka and Federer. So even the elite on these big occasions still do double faults and lose sets and matches. So again, to take away, there's nothing wrong about this. Tennis is a game of mistakes, even at the very elite level, who by definition are blessed with talent that us mortals don't have. And they practice many hours a day with expert coaching, and they still do these.
Yeah, so
great. I just want to thank Phil Johnson very much for being on the call. As I say, Phil is an expert clinical sports psychologist, an expert in trauma, brain spotting, and working with top international players. So people might not have heard of him, but they certainly wouldn't have access to him. So Phil, I want to thank you for being on the call. And Thomas, forever, your insightful tennis wisdom. Thank you very much, guys.
Much appreciated, Mark.
Thank you.
The purpose of this drill is to improve the accuracy of the second serve aimed at the backhand of a right-handed return player. The second serve down the tee on the deuce side is one of the most important serves to master. As you have seen in the previous clip, when the serve is not accurate, it curves towards the forehand of the opponent and at the same time gives him a better angle of attack. That's why the main goal of the first drill in this section is the accuracy of the second serve. Start by placing the can on the service line in the center between the sideline and the center service line, so that the can divides the service box in two equal halves. Do that for both players on each side of the net on the deuce side. Players A and B alternate serving only one topspin serve, and they aim in the area down the tee, which is now half of the service box wide. The scoring goes like this. If player A hits the target and player B also hits the target, no one gets the point. If both players miss the target, no one gets the point either. But if player A hits the target and player B misses, player A gets the point. And of course, if player A misses the target and player B hits it, player B gets the point. Play up to 5 and then start one more game where you switch the order of serving. Namely, the player who serves second in each point is under more pressure every time, because he knows, for example, that if player A hit the target, he now has to hit the target or he loses the point. Whereas the first player has nothing to catch up to. So serving first for each point is mentally definitely easier. If the target area is too big, or in other words, if both of you rarely miss it, narrow down the area to 1/3 of the width of the service box. To determine that quickly, just measure 4 feet from the center service line and place the can there. This second difficulty level should provide more challenge and pressure for both players. Ideally, you should be battling it out for about 5 to 10 minutes with one little break in between games. The best way to transition to the next drill is to go straight to the serve and return battle, which also takes place on the deuce side. That's because you'll still have the feel of hitting down the tee, which is what you'll need in the next drill. But since the process of working on your serve on the ad side is exactly the same, let's just take a quick look at how you battle it out with serves on the ad side. Start again with marking 1/2 of the width of the service box and aim at the half closer to the single sidelines. Again, alternate serving one topspin serve and scoring with the same system. If one player hits and the other one misses, the first player gets the point. In all other cases, meaning if both hit or if both miss, no one gets the point. If half of the service box is too easy, narrow it down to 1/3 and see whose serve fares better under pressure. Here's how to practice. Start on the deuce side and place the can on the service line in the middle of the service box. Players alternate serving one topspin serve down the tee in the marked area. They play up to 5 with this scoring system. If one player hits the target and the other one misses, the first player gets the point. If both miss or if both hit the target area, no one gets the point. To increase the difficulty, narrow down the target area to 1/3 of the width of the service box. After one player reaches 5 points, start again from 0 and switch the order of serving. The total duration of this drill should be between 5 to 10 minutes. The process of working on the accuracy of your second serve on the ad side is exactly the same, except that the target area is now the outside half of the service box.